Ringo Starr truly hated her more than anyone. He was born Richard Starkey on July 7, 1940, in the working-class area of Liverpool, England. He would go on to become Ringo Starr. Rose from poor beginnings to become one of the most adored artists in pop history. His early years were hard. His family had a hard time with money, and he had a lot of health problems as a child. As a child, Ringo spent a lot of time in hospitals getting better from illnesses like peritonitis and tuberculosis. These illnesses stopped him from going to school and slowed down his education. Still, these hard times made him strong and gave him a deep respect for life. He discovered his love for rhythm while staying in the hospital for long periods of time. He would often drum on tables and bedpans, setting the stage for his future as one of the most famous drummers in the world. Ringo had many jobs before he became famous all over the world. He was an apprentice joiner and a machine operator in a Liverpool workshop, among other things. He tried to hide his love of music, but it wouldn't go away. Skiffle and early rock and roll influenced him to start playing drums in local bands. Eventually, he joined Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, which was one of the best bands in Liverpool at the time. He stood out because of the lively way he played the drums and the happy way he was. And in 1962, Destiny called Pete Best, the original drummer for the Beatles, was fired, and John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison asked Ringo to join them. When he got there, the band had all the members it needed to make history in the music world. Ringo Starr was the drummer for the Beatles. He was known for his steady beat, creative fills, and unique sense of time. Even though he stayed out of the way most of the time, his music was an important part of the band's sound. His ability to add subtle but strong rhythms to melodies was shown in songs like Ticket to Ride, Rain, and A Day in the Life. Besides playing the drums, Ringo was a fan favorite because of his friendly and funny nature. He also became famous as a singer on a number of Beatles songs, such as With a Little Help from My Friends, Yellow Submarine, and Octopus's Garden. All of these songs showed how friendly and innocent he was, like a kid. When the Beatles broke up in 1970, Ringo Starr didn't want to be forgotten. He went out on his own instead, which showed that he was much more than just a drummer in a famous band. His first two solo records, Sentimental Journey 1970 and Bocas of Blues 1970, showed how versatile he was and how much he loved different types of music, such as pop, country, and jazz standards. His 1973 album Ringo was a huge hit, with songs like Photograph and You're 16 Inches going to the top of charts all over the world. People really connected with his friendly, approachable style, and working with his former Beatles teammates showed how close they were even after the band broke up. Ringo Starr had a great career in acting and movies. In addition to his music, he was in a number of movies, including Caveman 1981, That'll Be the Day 1973, and The Magic Christian 1969, all with Peter Sears. His natural sense of humor and down-to-earth nature made him likable both on and off screen. In later years, he also worked as a voice actor and narrator for children's TV shows. His voice was used on the popular show Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, which introduced him to a new group of fans who loved his warm, interesting stories. In the decades that followed, Ringo kept touring and recording with his all-star band, which was made up of famous singers from different generations. When he mixed Beatles classics with his own solo hits and the songs of his bandmates, his shows turned into happy celebrations of music, friendship, and unity. His impact as a drummer also grew, with many artists citing his accuracy, musicality, and quiet brilliance as examples of what they want to be like. Ringo was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II in 2018 for his services to music and culture. He is now known as Sir Richard Starkey, an award that has been long overdue for a man who helped shape modern popular music. Ringo Starr's love life shows both how rough it was when he was a famous Beatle and how strong the love he found later in life was. His first marriage to Maureen Cox and then to Barbara Bach were very different times in his life. Each was full of different feelings, difficulties, and opportunities for growth. In his first marriage, Ringo married Maureen Cox, a hairdresser from Liverpool, who loved the Beatles before she met him. In the early 1960s, when Beatlemania was going crazy around the world, their story began. The Cavern Club is where Maureen and Ringo met. It is a famous basement club where the Beatles got better and gained their first fans. Maureen was only a teenager when they met. They quickly became close, even though the band was a mess. Ringo, who is known for being friendly and funny, was deeply drawn to Morin's strong character. While many people were drawn to his fame, she saw him as Richard Starkey, the drummer, not just Ringo Starr, the worldwide star. They got married on February 11, 1965, when the Beatles were at the top of their popularity. Their wedding got a lot of attention from the media, and thousands of fans waited outside the registry office to see the couple. Inside the service, which was small and emotional, close family and friends, including John Lennon and George Harrison, were there. The years that Morin was there were marked by his dedication and strength. While Ringo toured the world and dealt with the stresses of being a hero, Morin took care of their home life in England and kept him and their growing family out of the public eye. They had 3 kids together, named Zach, Jason, and Lee Starkey. Zach would later become a recognized drummer in his own right and play with famous bands like The Who and Oasis, just like his father. But as the years went by and the Beatles broke up in 1970, the couple's marriage started to have major problems. Fame, long separations, and the allure of the rock and roll life were hard on them. Ringo has publicly said that he had a hard time during this time because he turned to drinking and lived a crazy, chaotic life after the Beatles broke up. Morin tried to keep the family together, but as time went on, they became less close. Even though they weren't married anymore after 1975, they stayed close through their children and mutual respect. Sadly, Morin Cox died of leukemia in 1994, when he was only 48 years old. Ringo was with her in her last days, and was deeply moved by her death. In the end, he said she was one of the most honest and loving people he had ever met, something real that he would always remember. Ringo fell in love with Barbara Bach again, after years of deep reflection and personal growth. Bach is an actress and model, who is best known for her part as Bond girl Anna Amosova, in the 1977 James Bond movie, The Spy Who Loved Me. In 1980, they met on the set of the adventure comedy Caveman, which they both appeared in. They had instant and obvious chemistry. Later, Ringo said that meeting Barbara was love at first sight and that she brought calmness, elegance, and mental stability to his life, which was very different from the rough times he had in his younger years. They got together quickly and got married on April 27, 1981, in a big wedding at London's Marylebone Town Hall. This is the same place where Paul McCartney married Linda Eastman more than 10 years before. A wedding party of friends, family, and fellow musicians came together to enjoy the union of 2 people who had found peace and friendship in each other. Barbara played a big role in helping Ringo deal with his drug problems. In the late 1980s, Ringo and Barbara both went to rehab at the same time, which changed their lives. Ringo often says that Barbara saved his life, both emotionally and physically. He says that her love and support were very important in his journey to sobriety and security. Over the years, their marriage has been one of the most stable and respected in the entertainment business. Ringo and Barbara have built a quiet and important life together, despite the stresses of fame. They split their time between homes in England, Monaco, and Los Angeles. They are both known for caring about good causes, especially those that help protect the earth and people who are recovering from addiction. Ringo often shows his belief in peace and love through his art and music, which Barbara and he both deeply believe in. People have thought of the Beatles as the example of musical unity for a long time. Together, these 4 young guys from Liverpool changed the world. But behind the band's fame and unity, which drew in millions of fans, there were often fights within, some of which went deeper than anyone knew. For Ringo Starr, George Harrison was a quiet bug who he looked up to, respected, and played with as the band became famous. But as time went on, slights, jealousy, and betrayal started to happen in their relationship. In the end, Ringo admitted that he was angrier at George than at anyone else in his life. "George was like a brother to me," Ringo once said. "Though brothers do fight more often than enemies ever do." Those words held years of stress that wasn't said. People often thought of Ringo as the Beatles' peacekeeper, but behind his calm appearance were angers that had built up over the years of their fame. Ringo was the last member of the group to join, taking over for Pete Best in 1962. He became famous very quickly. George had been with John Lennon and Paul McCartney from the start, so he often treated Ringo like a stranger. He wasn't mean, but he did have the air of someone who had been there first. George could be far away, Ringo remembered. He had his own world, his own spirituality, and sometimes he made me feel like I didn't belong in it. Tensions hit a peak in the late Beatles years, when creative goals and individual egos started to drive the group apart. George wanted to be known for writing songs, but he thought Lennon and McCartney were more famous than him. Ringo, on the other hand, had a hard time finding his place in a band where his singing was often overlooked. Ringo said, "There were times when I didn't even want to go to the studio. George and I didn't look at each other very often. I was sick of feeling like no one saw me." When Let It Be was filmed in 1969, it showed the stress very clearly. There were angry looks, short tempers, and times when Ringo just left because he couldn't handle the stress. But what really broke Ringo's love for George was when their personal lives got mixed up. In the early 1970s, George had a short relationship with Maureen Starkey, who was married to Ringo at the time. Even though George was married to Pattie Boyd at the time, Ringo was hit hard by the news. Years later he said, "I felt betrayed. It wasn't just a woman. It was about having faith. There was a line that was crossed by someone I thought was family." The affair was one of the worst things that ever happened to Ringo. It made him hate George so much that it took years for his feelings to heal. "I hated him for what he did," Ringo said straight out. "I really did. Anger didn't go away quickly. It stayed with me for a long time." After the fact, George admitted he was wrong, though not always in the most sorry way. When asked about it, he is said to have told Ringo, "Well, you know, all things must pass." The comment, which was a play on his own record title, made Ringo very angry because he thought it was an easy way to brush off the damage. According to Beatles fans, Ringo stayed away from George for months after the affair became public. When they did finally meet again, their talks were tense and short. Ringo said that we couldn't just pick up a drumstick and a guitar and make things better. Music didn't help that hurt get better. But as time went on, Ringo's deep spirituality and willingness to forgive started to shine through. Over the years he thought about what friendship meant to him, and how pointless it was to stay angry. In the late 1990s, George got cancer and Ringo went to be with him at the hospital, putting aside all his anger. "I told him I loved him," Ringo said in a soft voice. "I learned that love was stronger than hate after everything that happened. I didn't want to leave this world while we were still hurting." He said that George smiled and took his hand. For a moment the years of stress were gone. When George Harrison died in 2001, Ringo was one of the first people to talk about his friend in public. "George was my brother," he said through tears. "I may have hated him once, but I always loved him." That statement showed how complicated their relationship was, the strong feelings, the flaws of people, and finally the unbreakable bond they had formed through music and a shared past. When it comes down to it, Ringo Starr's relationship with George Harrison shows that love and anger can live together even in heroes. Behind every harmony sung and drum beat played, was a bond that had been put to the test by fame, betrayal, and time. A bond that lasted until the end, even though it had scars.